Howdy, I'm Jack Wheeler, and today we're going to talk about childhood fantasies and how they can impact the world if things go right. When I was 12 years old, I had the opportunity to meet President Dwight Eisenhower in the White House. I was invited because I was the youngest Eagle Scout, and that's another story. But this was in 1956, so it's a long time ago. And it was an extraordinary experience, of course. I never ever forgot it, looking up at the President of the United States. He put his hand on my shoulders. That was in the middle of October in 1956, and of course he was running for president. He took the time off to see me. But before the end of the month, before the election, the Soviets invaded Hungary and started crushing the freedom fighters, shooting them in the streets, snipers up on the buildings, shooting them in the square in Budapest. And Eisenhower didn't do anything. And I was crushed because Eisenhower is my hero. And I always wondered why. And so as time went on, I realized that the Soviets could crush any rebellion if it was just one of them. So I thought, by now I'm 13. And so I developed this fantasy. I had this fantasy. I'd go to bed thinking about it every night when I went to sleep. I never told anybody. But I had this fantasy that I realized that while the Soviets could crush one rebellion, if there was a whole bunch of them, if there was ones in Czechoslovakia and in East Germany and Romania and Bulgaria and Poland, not just Hungary, why then it would be too big for the Soviet Union to put down, and that would be the way to do it. So of course, my fantasy was I led this rebellion, and I had a special armored suit made by some super scientists, and it went on and on and on. I'm 13 years old. I mean, as a kid's fantasy. And as time went on, it kind of went, in my mind, back. And so then, of course, high school and girls and college and girls and all of that kind of got forgotten, except when I was just about to graduate, I had the chance to meet Ronald Reagan. My father had known Ronald Reagan in Hollywood, and I asked to meet him because he gave this incredible speech. And I asked to meet him, and I'd never asked to meet anybody that my father knew ever before. So he said, okay. So he called, he said, Ron, this is Jackson. My son heard your speech at UCLA, he'd like to meet you. And so he said, well, come on over. And so this was in October 1965. And 9 years later since I met Eisenhower. And of course, at the time, Reagan was an actor, and there was talk about his running for governor, but that was it. But I met him, and I was just so taken by this man. I'd never met a man with a depth of energy like that. I cannot describe what it's like to meet Ronald Reagan. And I found myself saying, Mr. Reagan, what you're saying is exactly what I believe in America, and what can we do, and if there's anything I can do to help you if you decide to run for governor, I do it. And I couldn't believe this because here I'm graduating, I've set up this little business in Vietnam, I have not got any political experience whatsoever. But I ended up getting invited to be the state chairman of Youth for Reagan. And it was an amazing experience, that whole campaign of the spring of 1966. And I traveled all over the state with Mr. Reagan, and got to know him, and he was such a wonderful man. On the word. But the bottom line is, that was it. he got elected. I didn't want to be in politics. I went off and I decided to get a PhD in philosophy instead. So, but the point is that was 1965, 1966. And now, 15 years later, all those kids that were with me in Youth for Reagan in California, a lot of them are now in the White House because Mr. Reagan is now President of the United States. And so we had a toast because we stayed friends all those years. And we had a toast that was, every time we got together, we always loved Ronald Reagan for wanting to get the government out of our pockets and off our backs. But we really loved Ronald Reagan because he was so anti-communist. So our toast was FTC, which means fool the communists, foil the communists, something like that. At any rate, so we all got together. Now the president is the president, Mr. Reagan is president of the United States, Governor Reagan for 8 years. And I said, hey guys, how about FTC for real? And they didn't, well, yeah, right, good idea, how are we going to do that? And then all of a sudden, that fantasy of mine came back. That fantasy of mine came back when I was 13 years old. And I realized that that fantasy was coming true. Right in front of me. That there were these anti-Soviet rebellions happening in different places, in different colonies around the world. And I thought, wow, wait a minute. We can do something here. Here we go. And that fantasy of mine started coming true right in front of my eyes. And then in the next segment, because this is going on a little bit long, we'll talk about how it did come true and the Reagan Doctrine emerged out of it. Thanks.